the fifth BEXIS Tech Talk, and this one is on extensibility of the BEXIS system, BEXIS 2 system.
Okay, so I think today we somehow learned that BEXIS 2 is extensible in some ways, and now we are pleased to announce it maybe in a more formal way and also in more detail, so that to see which parts are extensible and how they are going to be extensible, and what are the limitations or difficulties or manual work that are involved. I would like to refer to some of the previous talks and also a very short history of the BEXIS system in general, or BEXIS 2 in general, is that we were trying to develop a system that is basically trying to manage the data lifecycle management and keep it lean and clean, so that we are not going to develop whatever possible. It's just that we have a conceptual model that is working with the life cycle of a data management system or an imaginary system. And then we try to provide best functions there. Whatever else is going to be a module, either developed by us or developed by contribution efforts or whatever. And then it was going to be generic in terms of providing this platform for multiple domains, or even multidisciplinary domains, so that we are not bound to biodiversity or ecology and so on. But the main use cases or scenarios that are using BEXIS currently, or BEXIS 2 currently, are mainly ecological or biodiversity information systems. And today is going to be more about the extensibility, and later we will talk maybe in next conferences about portability and scalability. The focus today is on the extensibility. The thing that we were trying to put in the DLM, I guess you have seen it several times in different scenarios, is that we have some sort of data that has some sort of structure, and we would like to manage it, but it's not enough. Then we add some metadata that again has some structures. And then to make the system working, we need to have some administrative context like project size, plots, institutes, and so on. And then, as usual, we need security to be applied on all these things. And because it's basically about the research and in the domains that we are interested in, geoscience or geographical information is mainly involved. So there should be some geographical information also in the DLM or in the core system, so that is some sort of usable or at least manageable in terms of services that we are going to expose to the outside of the system. And then with that, we created this architecture that again is repetitive, I guess. The core functions are here. We provide these functions to the outside world basically through these three arms, like with the modularity, so that if someone is going to develop a module, there is an interface here that the module is talking to that interface, and via that has access to the core functions that we provide. Anything else is the responsibility of the module itself. So for example, with the booking, if the booking is going to have something with the data sets, comes here. If it's something like a car to be reserved, that car is part of the responsibility of the module, and then we don't care actually to that, but we provide some sort of utility functions like security check authorizations. This kind of things are provided, but we don't announce them as core functions. They are just utility functions that are used in bigger functions, either by the core or by the module. And then there is a UI framework, that this UI framework actually exposes the functions to a human end user, so which is basically our web interface. But any other interface, if going to be developed, is also using this UI framework to access the core functions, and that's it. And then any external tool like machine-to-machine interoperability or communication will go through this integration part or integration arm that is, for example, if an R client or any other third-party tool is going to send data to us or to retrieve data from our system has to go through this integration interface. And then the implication is that maybe the functions here and here and here are not equal. So we expose more functions through our UI, and then maybe a little bit less through our modularity, and again a little bit less through our integration. It's because of our policies maybe, or the requirements that are involved. So for example, here we may stay on contract so that, for example, you are allowed to have a request, a limited number of requests in a specific time frame for a specific data set or a specific part of the core functions and so on, but actually our UI framework is not limited to that. So it's kind of differences in providing services through these different arms. If you need more information on these things, there are some talks recorded on YouTube, and also the slides are on SlideShare and so on, so it would be easy to follow these links here, and I guess previous slides also had some links to know about these things in more detail. And then with today's talk, I'm going to have a little bit more detail about what aspects of the system are going to be extensible. And the first one that we are hearing for a long time is the module development, that is going to be a mechanism to help add functionalities to BEXIS. And the module is actually a bunch of logically related functions, and this logic is completely based on the developer and their requirement. There is no real restricted logic. So anything that you think that is good to work together is a module, and hopefully the functions inside have some logical coherence together so that you can package it and then start working or start putting it into the system. There are some samples here, for example. If you are going to support some specific data formats, because we have a limited data format support like CSVs and Excel files and maybe text files. But if you're going to have, I don't know, LiDAR data, NetCDF, or anything else, maybe you develop a module for that, plug it into the system, and then it would be visible through the data submission process or workflow. And data analysis, different visualization, geographical search, and this kind of things, and the resource booking that you have seen just right before me, or semantic search that Friedrich and Al-Sayed are working on those things. They are all grouped or defined as module boundaries, and then they will work on top of BEXIS. Today I'm going to have a more developer view of the module so that we will see some details that how to start developing a module inside BEXIS if you have forked our GitHub branch, for example. Another aspect of extensibility is the data integration, as I just talked about, is that we would like to interchange data and services either by consuming them or by providing them. So if we provide something, maybe, for example, GFBio is able to consume one of our servers to retrieve metadata in a specific format if we have a protocol together that we can understand. Like this publishing, allowing access to data sets for analysis. Like tomorrow morning we have a hackathon on R, that this R is going to access a BEXIS instance to retrieve one of the data sets, for example, or any data set, reformat it as an R frame, and then start analyzing it inside the R environment. So it's like an interchange of data between BEXIS and R. And then that package, if it's done or established well, maybe we can just release it. Actually is on GitHub right now, but there is no real function there. So then it's sort of a client for consuming data via the services that we are providing. A sample of consuming services that we are going to, I guess, with Göttingen, to have PIDs or permanent identifiers for our data set. If we are going to publish something, then we need that PID to be attached to that version so that we always recognize that this ID is attached to this version, and then while the data set is alive, that PID is also provided some sort of like digital objects or DUIs. And then in that case, we are going to consume a service that is provided by another party somewhere else. And then the last point or last aspect of extensibility that I'm going to talk about today is branding. As BEXIS, actually we are not BEXIS for our purpose. We are developing BEXIS, and then there are some customers like IDIF, for example, Aquadiva and other projects that are using BEXIS, but actually they want to brand it as their product. It's like that when you are using IDIF portal, you see the logo of IDIF, and there is no need to be BEXIS there. Actually, the BEXIS would be just supported by BEXIS at the footer. That's enough. And then the rest of the application should look like your own system. So this kind of concepts are categorized under branding. Actually, there are more than logos. So we will also see some branding features here so that you know how to rebrand an installed, instance of BEXIS. So then, before going to those aspects, I need to a little bit talk about the shell, the interface that you see, and almost working with that to see what components are here, and then we will use those components or those names later in the in the branding and also in the integration and so on. So this is the general shell of the BEXIS application. When we remove every function from it, and there is no function, no module installed in BEXIS, the rest is the shell. So the shell means that, for example, there are some menus there, there are some ways to log in, and then there are some empty UIs. So if you install a module, it will be more menu items. Menus are starting to function, and then you see some interaction, some meaningful interaction also with the system. So an empty application is called shell, actually the visual part. And then the shell has layouts with dealing with the arrangement of those data items and also the content that is going to be represented at those places. We will see some major places. And then the themes are actually determining the look and feel. So if you don't like this color codes here, for example, you can change them via choosing or developing new themes, and then they will appear as you like. This would be also a part of the branding if you're looking at what would be a branding option. And then the menus here, how they are generated. If you, for example, install a new module, how the functions of that module are integrated in the shell and how they are accessible is part of this menu feature of the shell. Or if you disable your module or uninstall it, what happens to the integrated items into the shell? So for the first one, for the arrangement and content, let's see this in a bigger way. And then this is one of the parts. Actually, we don't care about the content now, just think about the layout. I mean, by layout, this is an area, we call it left pane, and then as the content pane, there is another one there that is hidden now, is right pane, and then there is a, let's say, the header part or header section. There is an information section there, or personalization section. There is a footer here, and so on. Some of them are hidden, so you see them in different color. This is the layout. So with BEXIS, you can change this layout and provide your own layout. If you don't like it, for example, if you don't like these menus to be here and you want them here, or even you want them here, just change the layout and they will go to some other places. And this changes is by just manipulating some simple files. And also is part of the theme. So if you provide your own theme, you can provide your own layout with that. And then the layout, when the layout is set, you can decide which content should go to which layout section. So for example, here, now we have decided that the search facets should come here, but you may don't like it and want it here. In that case, just go to the layout content provider and say the content to this section should come from this service. And they are basically service-based systems. So menu is calling a service is an internal service, and the menu structure is given back to this layout part, and the layout has a renderer that renders that content into that location. So with the combination of internal services like content providers and the layouts, you can do whatever you like. Actually, not whatever, but a lot of cases that you have a degree of freedom to change the appearance of the system. Okay, then with these things, with the themes, if you look at this part, it's using a theme, we call it default. Is another theme, I guess, is one of the themes that we are just using for test purposes. So that here you see that it's completely changed. The facets are set in this way and colored in different, in green or, I don't know, turquoise. Here there is no color and also there is no category like this. It's just the first level and so on, and you don't see color codes, you don't see this, what's that, this buttons, navigation buttons here and so on. So it's possible to play with the themes to get the appearance you want or to remove those parts that you think maybe are not properly designed for your scenarios. And with the menus, when you register a module, this menu structure gets expanded according to the menu, the exposed menu items of your module. We will see how to expose a menu structure. And they will be integrated in the shell. There are some fixed items, like the dashboard is always here because we like it to be here. And the search, for example, but there is a degree of flexibility to inject your own menu items into this structure. So for example, you can inject something into the plan if you have an additional scenario that is more frequently used in your instance, for example. In that case, when people open this search, I guess there is one, yeah. When people open this, maybe they see your own data submission first, or I don't know, data structure creation first, or whatever. So you can play with these things to put more frequently used menus in your instance to be closer to the user interaction. Okay, and then with that part of introductory to the shell, I'm going one by one to those three aspects to see how we are going to develop them or what is possible there. With the module development, as I said, it's just a related set of, this is the keyword, user-facing functions. They are not the normal functions that are behind the scene, like analyses or queries or so on. They have to interact with the user. Either, in that case, we call them module, otherwise they are not called module in BEXIS terminology, we call it just component. So you can develop a component that is doing some services internally, but if you are going to have a user interaction, then you should think about developing a module. With this definition or with this guideline here, user-facing functions, then every function should have these three parts: a UI layer, a service layer, and possibly a data access layer. Data access layer is not mandatory because we have some core functions that you can call, but in, like, say, if your module is going beyond the core functionality, then normally you need some sort of data access. In that case, we provide some utility data access functions that you can use to actually not face accessing database directly or to go through the authorization system. So there are some facilities there that you can use, but as a developer, you can bypass everything that I am saying from now on. So with the UI, to create a module is the BEXIS shell here, if you have the code. Inside the BEXIS shell, there is an area folder that if you go inside that area folder, every module is represented as a folder. Actually, the UI part of that module is represented as a as a folder here. And then if you see, they are basically three letters and mostly ending in M. This is because we have a naming convention that is recommending some sort of naming. If you are going to develop, it's better to take a look at that naming convention also. And then if you go inside this, you see this is again the area, the module DCM is a data collection module here. And then inside that, there are some predefined folders that we need to be there, and there are some additional ones. One of the main things we need is area registration. We will see something inside that, but this is like that introducing your module to the shell or to integrate it into the shell so that every time that application starts, we read the functions from here, execute them, and then make the module prepared and also make the shell to be aware of that. And then because we are using Microsoft MVC pattern, you see that there are some M's, like models. These are the objects that you basically deal with. So this is data transfer objects. If you are going to grab data from database or any other external service, they have to be represented as models here. And then you see V's. These views are actually those part of the contents that are rendered to the shell. So basically you are rendering these things to the shell. And then if you have a logic like grabbing data from somewhere, doing some transformation on it, and then combining it with something else and so on, you need this controller part, which actually is the UI logic controller. So grab data, do whatever you like, and then feed it to the view. Feed it to the view, and view will be requested to be rendered to the shell based on the things that you have done in the controller. And then you see these helpers, images, static data, and so on. They are just optional, and you are free to use whatever you like. So inside the area, basically, we need this function that is introducing the name. And then if there is a naming conflict, so for example, I am developing a DCM and you are also developing DCM, there would be a naming conflict report when you are running your instance, and then hopefully you have the chance to find it out and solve it. We are going to externalize all these things so that you don't need to recompile the module, but currently it's just hard-coded there. So if there is a naming conflict, contact to the developer is required. And then the registration area, this is something we need for URL namespace creation, so that, for example, when you are requesting a resource from BEXIS instance, you will have the main URL and then a slash, basically this, and then your controller, and then your action, and so on. So this is like a standard MVC pattern, and then we use the module codes also to create distinct namespaces to reduce first the name clash, and also to provide some sort of logical namespaces in the URL space that you are going to expose to the rest of the world. So beside that, there are some files that are basically ready. You just use them. I'm just showing them for references because it's going to be recorded and later used by some absent developers. So they need to have also this view start CHTML for each module that they create in the views part, so that it's basically setting the theme based on the configuration of the system. It's not really that much, but it's just long. And then if your module, actually there is no if, at least one function should be exposed to be considered as a module. So those functions that are going to be exposed are defined in terms of menu items. So for menu items, you have two options, either by manipulating this file that is here, so area size views nav for navigation, and then underline menus dot something. Go there, see everything, and change whatever you like. Or a more proper way is that inside your registration, inside here, there is a third function that is here, which calls register menus. In that case, you have an option to register your menus programmatically, or by reading this from an XML or even from a remote service, or how do you like to populate your menu structure. And you see, this menu structure is basically a hierarchical node creation. So here is the root node, and then an export function with some information. So it could have deeper menu items or more siblings. In that case, when the when the application is getting started, we read these things also, and for each module we create a root menu item. And if there is a similar name, for example here, if there is export, and we see that there is another export, we will merge them together as upper node, and then you see export from DCM, export from DDM, export from somewhere else. So they won't get lost, and if the upper nodes, like those container nodes, are equal, then we will merge them into that first line menu item that is available for the whole shell. Okay, then every module can basically have some configuration items. These configuration items, if you need something like with the same life cycle of the application, it would be better to put it in web config. Actually, we don't recommend this because web config is like for the whole application. But if you are sure that this is something for the whole application life cycle, you can put it there. Otherwise, a better place is a folder called workspace. This workspace has a config folder for each module, and then you are free to put whatever you like there. Either configuring, either static data, either, I don't know, temporary folders or whatever you like can go here, and it's not touched by any other module. So it's like your private own, in terms of module, private own area, free structure, free format. So it's like this. If you are going into the workspace folder, there is a modules folder. Inside that module folder, each module can have its own structure. For example, DCM is more interested in keeping metadata, but this RPM is putting the seed data there, like the static data or the initial data, and some templates there. So it's different based on the scenarios that are supported by that module. And then in additional to that config folder, there is another folder, we call it data folder, that is basically when you are putting data there. Like for example, the data submission process accepts your file, and that file goes, when it's stored in a database, the file itself as the original of that data source, data set is also going to this data folder. Like for example, you see here, the data folder has a data sets folder, and then for each folder, for each data set has another folder here, which inside that all the versions are also kept. So it's basically easy to back up this area as the original of the whole data that is inside the system if something goes wrong with the database, or for example. So in general, a copy of this one and the backup of database would be basically enough to reconstruct the situation on a disaster and so on. So inside the data folder, there is a special temp folder, which is like for temporary users or temporary uses. So that, for example, if I'm going to push a big file onto the server and later to start working on that, that one goes to my own username-based folder on the server and keeps there just to have a private area for temporary usages. And then later when I am processing it, it will be removed from here. Okay, then every module may have something, we call it seed data. This seed data is actually the basic data that is needed for the module to be able to work. Like for example, with the data submission, we need data structures, and data structures need variables. Then variables need units, and units need, let's say, for example, data types. So we will install or develop the module with some sort of minimum units of measurements, a set of data types, a set of something else, and so on, and put all the relationship into this seed data, and then ship the module. When you install the module for the first time, or the application is getting installed for the first time, this seed data generation will also getting triggered. So it's not per application start is per application install, or when you are going to reset everything. So there is a switch that you can reset everything, the database will be recreated, and in that case, this kind of seed data generation will be fired again. So that when application is running, there is a basic functioning data in the database that you can start with and then continue. It's just an example. It's again in the module registration area. There is a guard against this. If the database is going to be created, this generate seed data function will be called, and generate seed data is something like this, for example, that is here actually is reading the unizygous, no, it's the types, data types. It's just read them from an XML, create proper records and push the records to our data type table. Okay, up to now it was just your own development, but if there are some other libraries that you are going to develop or use, they go somewhere else. If you remember, we were working inside web.shell, inside areas, and then inside our module. But if you have some libraries that are not going to be user interfacing, but they are going to be used in your own domain, like the functions, analyses, data access, and this kind of things, they will go into these modules. And again, there is a naming similar to that naming there. And then inside that, you can have as many .NET projects or libraries as you like. If you need a third-party library, I guess there was a third or fourth call talking about third-party libraries, so you can maybe consult, taking a look at that, and then see how third-party libraries are used, what kind of third-party libraries we use so that they are available, and what is the functions that are available there. Okay, so should I stop here for some feedback, or? So then I just continue, so you need more memory then. Okay, with the modules is basically done. So I'm trying to change to branding now. It's a completely new and experimental feature. So maybe you would be welcome to have more feedback here, so that if there is something to be taken care of before the next release, we would be happy to have it. But for now, it's like a special release for the conference. So it's like how they announced it, these things, like I don't know, a special edition. A special edition. Okay, so this is the first time that we are talking about the branding and the features that are available and how they are working. So hopefully it's something interesting. The main question is that who needs to rebrand BEXIS? As I said, is the projects or the customers that are using BEXIS for their own community. And they want to have the community to recognize their brand or their reputation or whatever. And then we are going to have these functions because of that requirement. And then whoever is using BEXIS to rebrand it, we call it a tenant, so that there is a tenant with some information that is registered in the system, and that tenant information is represented to the user. And it's possible to have multiple tenants in one BEXIS instance if you, for example, install BEXIS for PIs and for normal researchers and want to represent it in different way. Or if you have a demo that wants different branding than the actual one, or whatever scenario that you have. And I will show you how the tenancy and multi-tenancy are working and what information is needed to be provided. So we will have some branding on appearance, on documents, and on functions that are provided by BEXIS, and we will see some examples right here. So this is the BEXIS when no branding is applied. So something here, and something here, like the privacy policy, contact us, and imprint are actually BEXIS information. So when you have it in ID, for example, or Aquadiva, this is basically not your privacy policy, and this is not your contact or imprint or whatever. And also these logos or brands maybe are not yours, so you may want to change them or apply something additional. So in this case, it's the IDIV. You see here is different, here is different, and I guess here is also different. At least there is no contact us. And we will see why there is no contact us very soon. And also if we see this privacy policy here is different than the one that we ship with the basic software. So with the functions, if you see this area, then take a look at the IDIV one. You see centers have been added here, and there are some items are also as a sub-menus that are added basically with the tenancy information without the need for developing anything specific. So you just provide that information, and then the system is reacting based on that. So the idea is simple, is that for any tenant, we have a tenant package that is submitted to us as a zip file. There are some content. We will see what is inside. And then when the zip is arrived, we validate it against our rules. If everything is going to be fine, we register it, unzip it, and then use it as the tenant. But as you see, there are multiple tenants here, so there should be some way to resolve the proper tenant to, for example, determine who is the current tenant right now, if there are multiple tenants registered with the system. So inside that tenant, when it's unzipped, actually there is a manifest file with some textual information, some keys, and so on. We will see also. And these three main blocks of information. Images, anything that is an image, anything that is a content, like for example, privacy policy is a content, imprint is a content, but logo is an image, and the themes, as we have talked about the themes, is like a big chunk of information about the appearance, the layout, the content providers, and so on. So whatever is possible with the themes, you can download one of the existing themes of BEXIS, try manipulate it, and then pack it into the package and send it to your tenancy information. So this is a manifest file or a sample manifest file. ID, a short name, a title, a description, a logo, favorite icon, the theme that you want to use, the layout that you want to use, the landing page. The landing page means that when I'm approaching this web application, which of those menu items should be the first page that I'm seeing. And then some contents like the policy, contact, imprint, and so on. There are some extensions that I have just removed from here, like the menus, like custom contents if you need something in addition to these items, and so on. And then when this is ready, you put also those folders together, zip it, and send it to us. And when we try to register it and later to resolve it. But with the resolution, there are something that we have to take care about, is that first of all, when you are hitting that URL to go to an BEXIS instance, like in this case, IDIV, for example, you are just, I guess, typing idata.idif.de. In that case, you are going to their data portal. In that case, how we are going to resolve the tenant, there is two ways. If you are going to use the single tenant mode, there is a key in the web config that you will write the tenant is IDIV, and IDIV there is the key in the manifest file, and that's it. But if you don't like that, or you need more tenants information to be resolved, then in each tenant there is a concept of matching rules. It's basically some regular expressions that will be matched against the incoming HTTP request. So the URL plus the port number, they will be matched against those regular expressions, and whoever matches is the current tenant, and we will use that as the resolved tenant. For each tenant, there is a backup tenant that we always ship, that is BEXIS. So if something is missing there, or if there is no tenant at all, or it's the first time that you are installing BEXIS, that tenant will be resolved, and then the management tool allows you to change it, to upload something new, or to download that BEXIS, manipulate as your way, and then upload it again, and so on. So as you've seen here, there are some names, we call this names, like short name, title, description, logo, and so on. And this is the value of that name. So if there is a backup or fallback, we call it fallback, I guess, fallback tenant, you can just stay with, for example, you can say, okay, with the contact, I'm just using the fallback contact. So in that case, you don't need to write this line, and then we automatically resolve this key to the fallback one. So you don't need to provide all this information, just whatever is changed or you want it to be your own, just provide those parts. So for example, with the favorite icon or with the theme and layout, if you don't need to change them, just don't provide them. So this is the first thing that we call it name resolution. If something is in your tenant information, we use that, the name. If it's not, we use the fallback one. And then the second part is that, okay, I have this name, but where is the file? Where is the resource itself? And then it's called resource resolution. With the resource resolution, we go to your tenant package, look for those 3 folders. If this resource is there, we will use it from your tenant folder or tenant package. If not, we go to the fallback folder. And again, if not, we go to the application default values and see if there is something there. So there is 2 levels of fallbacks. If you forget something, nothing goes wrong, but maybe it's not what you meant by the what's that, tenant package. And then if you have the package installed, inside the system administration area, you will have this tenant information. So these are the tenants. You can enable them or disable them. You can download them and change them. You can submit a new one like this. And also you can make another one default. If BEXIS by default is default, but if you don't like it, you can make your own default, and then it will be used as a fallback for the others. So for example, if you have a main IDIF and an ID for this event, another ID for that event, another one for the PIs and so on, you may make the root IDIF as the default tenant. So whatever setting is there will be broadcasted to the others. And then you may need some sort of like a specific description for that event, but the icon is still that one. Privacy policy is still that one. So it's like differential changes among the packages. And then if you click edit, for example, then you have these options to make something default, make something active, and so on. And also there are some logics behind this thing. You cannot remove all the tenants. There should be at least 1 tenant, at least 1 active tenant, and at least 1 default tenant. They can be all just 1. So it's not required to have 1 default, 1 active, and 1 minimum. You can just merge them to whatever you like, what combination you like. Okay, that was about the branding. And then the last part is the integration. Is the place that we will provide or consume services. So provide services for the other tools or systems, or consume services from the other system. Currently, the focus is on offering pool-based services. And offering means that we are providing the service. Pool-based services that we are not active. Someone should call this service, so we don't do anything. Service is just there. If someone is calling us, we try to respond, and if not, we just return an error message. That's the thing that currently we have. And then in this area, we have 3 sorts of integration. The basic one is authentication and authorization that is automatically applied on all the services. And then we provide something to fetch a data set or to retrieve a data set. To retrieve the schema of data set, by a schema is directly the data structure, which is variables, their types, their unit, and so on, and the metadata of that data set. So anything starts from a data set perspective. So for example, here we have the schema of that, selected variables and so on. And then we will see the APIs, I guess, very soon. The access method is that web-based APIs using HTTP and REST. Currently, we don't support HTTPS. I don't know exactly why, but it was like technical problems. The output format of this web APIs are basically CSV if applies, like for data sets, for primary data, JSON and XML, and is determined by the content type of the HTTP request that you are sending to us. So you have to set the header inside your HTTP request, and then we parse that, and based on the request, we will return something that is meaningful according to that one. So if, for example, your content type is application JSON, we will return JSON. If it's text XML, we will return XML. And if it's text CSV, we will return a CSV file or CSV stream that you can download it or consume it through your, through your tool. One example of this thing that we currently have is R package or R BEXIS package for R that is consuming this web-based HTTP REST CSV. And we are going to test it in more detail with other APIs tomorrow morning. So if you're interested, we can meet there tomorrow morning to see what is possible. And then with the APIs, it's like that. This is your namespace, URL, and then API and data is just providing the primary data. So if you have this data only, it will list the ID of all data sets. And then based on that, you can choose one ID. And then if you provide the ID, it will return that the latest version of that data set, actually latest checked in version. If the data set is checked out, means we are not allowed to send you anything because it's currently under editing. So you have to wait, but you get a message that data set is checked out. And then in addition to that, you can set the header so that, for example, if a data set has hundreds of columns, or there are some columns that you are not interested in, you can select some of the header items by just providing the name of the variables, and then you will get something back that is containing only those columns. And then also you can filter the rows based on the criteria that you are passing to us, and the criteria can be any logical expression like this one. Just enclose it in parentheses and send it to us. It's very similar to SQL, for example. Nested expressions, nested parentheses, operations, and so on are supported, but currently we don't support functions. So it's not possible to say, for example, SQRT of these things and so on. But normal non-function included expressions are accepted. And then we filter the data set based on this criteria, and then remove the non-requested columns also, and return you a subset of that data set that maybe is something that you need. It will reduce the bandwidth actually, because it's done on the server side, and the transfer is just those part of the CSV or JSON that was requested, and then that's it. Combining these things is also possible, like dataset 6 with this headers, with this filter, then, or any of them, any combination of these things is acceptable. If you are interested to see the structure or the schema of any dataset, just provide the dataset ID to this API, structures, and then you have it in a JSON format. Currently with this API, only JSON is supported because it's not a tabular only response. We respond some attribute values like the name of the data structure, if it's locked, or you can change it, if it's a structured one or an unstructured one, and so on, and then the variables with the information about the variables. So it's like a header part and then a table. So this is because we decided maybe JSON is more meaningful here, but not CSV. And then again, you see here there is no structures only, because we don't expose all the structure IDs. just you should know the data set and then ID of that data set and request a structure of that data set. It's not just hitting something and then have the response. And then the same thing with metadata. If you are interested in having the metadata of a data set, just call this API and we will return the metadata in XML format. But you can define the standard if there isn't a standard in our system. You can you can request that one, like by this, convert to EML. Then you will see the metadata of that data set according to EML as far as we have mapping for EML. So maybe there is no mapping, then we return the standard one. Maybe the mapping is not complete, then we will return a subset. If the mapping is complete, then we will return a complete subset, complete EML. So it's based on the data administrator of that data set or that system to be sure that the mapping information from data set, from metadata to standards are complete or not. And I guess this is one of the last ones. Yeah. As Roman mentioned, is part of a Tech Talk series we are running. Actually is like the 5th one, maybe 2, 3 more are in the queue. And this is basically the title or the main title of the next one is the UI structure and the web API, how they are working together, more detail, more technical things, more development things. That's it. And then, thank you very much. How long do you think?
Are there any questions for those who are left? Yeah, Paul.
I have a question regarding this branding and the concepts of tenants. What was the motivation of having the option to have multiple tenants? So are you planning to have like one BEXIS instance for multiple projects?
That's the idea, yeah. Let's go there. Actually, the idea was that, as I said, when you have a mainstream installation, maybe some events happen, like a workshop, for example, a one-day workshop that you want to have something specific there that is not on your main website. Or there is sub-branches, like it's a big project and then you have something for a specific projects there, maybe short-term one, PhDs, I don't know, students, class of something and so on. And then in the long run, I'm not sure when, is that currently this multi-tenancy applies only on the UI. Later we can use this multi-tenant information to put keys on the data also, so that the database can be also multi-tenant. In that case, then you can use it for a variety of scenarios, but is not supported and is also not in the backlog even. So this is just the first try. And then the second reason was that having multi-tenancy in addition to single tenancy was easy. Then we said, okay, so let's have it.
Yeah, sure. Another question regarding the last part is that on this API stuff. A simple question. You showed that we can query the data once we know the ID of the data set. The question would be, how could we find the ID?
With this, with this one. With the data, if you don't provide any ID, we'll list all the IDs.
And that will be all the IDs of data you have access.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then based on that, you can request the metadata, for example, see, okay, it's a good data set, then request the data itself. And also there are some more, but they are not currently working, so that you can request for the whole data set as a package. I mean, the structure, metadata, and the primary data, everything together, then take it somewhere.
And when will this be available? And for now, this is not part of the...
Actually, is currently available. It was not part of the previous release that was like 2 weeks ago, but currently is available. And tomorrow we will be testing all these things using the R Hackathon. I guess there would be some improvement. And then we have to decide to release it as a service pack, as a patch or something.
And if there's high demand, before the next release, we can probably release it as a patch or something like that.
And is it, if I understand it correctly, at the moment it's working for receiving data. So I can query some data and see it, so to say, are you thinking also of the other way around?
Yeah.
So are you receiving data and are you running your analysis?
Yeah.
And you want to publish to BEXIS, so to say, some of
Actually, all these APIs have the other way around also, but we have closed them. It's actually like blocked because they are not tested, and we also are not sure what to expect from the clients. Like, for example, if you're going a data set to us, what is that data set or what is included? Is it like including metadata or not? How we can interact with you, because it's not easy if there is an error, for example, or is a missing data and so on. Yeah, but the main functionality are there. So we want to basically to remove the UI processes from the APIs to see whether they still are able to work or not.
Anything else? Dan, I think. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you.